Hello everyone, welcome back to Alkaline Hydroxide 784. This week we round off the theme of things that greatly impacted history and maybe started to see with another topic most dear to me. I'd say I have great chemistry with this topic. Wow, what a terrible pun. Anyways, we have a lot to look at because chemistry actually has a very important part in making life as we know it be a thing. Wait, we could go even further back to when the Big Bang happened and matter clumped together. At that point, we see neutrons and protons and electrons. Then, these combine into hydrogen atoms, which then became deuterium, tritium, and well, you get the point. These light atoms combine together into larger atoms, heavier elements, and those with large enough cores became reaction sites for heavier elements. Stars became the sites of nuclear fusion, and planets formed from aggregates orbiting the stars. Speaking of planets, chemistry affected the Earth. First, it was the CO2 formed from carbon and oxygen belched by volcanoes. Then it was the early formation of life as we know it from, little molecules according to the Miller-Urey experiments. Basically, it was done anaerobically. And, these lives then progressed to becoming aerobic life, which either respired you which either which respire with oxygen, and there's also other organisms that produce oxygen as like cyanobacteria and eventually plants with the help of radiation from the sun's nuclear fusion. And then we have animals and eventually us humans who are now in awe with the Big Bang theory as well as biochemistry. Okay, I guess that may have not made a lot of sense. But basically, if you've learned molecular biology, you would have realized that a lot of it is, well, chemistry. From something as simple as lipid molecules making a spear, or like a cell membrane for that matter, from hydrophobic interactions, to something such as metabolism with the citric acid cycle, to the interactions of myosin moving along the cell skeleton, to literally the whole dogma of life with DNA and RNA and proteins. And of course, the action potentials going through your nerves and brain. Okay, fine. Before I literally get too immersed into biology or biochemistry, you kind of get the point. Aren't you fascinated by this? Like, seriously. Apart from biological life as we know it, chemistry has also played a big part in innovations of all sorts. The innovation of fire is literally the vigorous oxidation of a hydrocarbon. The invention of various foods, heat instigating certain reactions in the food to make it more palatable, or maybe fermentation by yeast or by other means. And technically, you can sense the taste because of receptors that work chemically. Like, for example, MSG, the glutamate, there's a receptor that sends the glutamate, and that sends a signal to your brain, and you sense the taste of umami, I guess. Well, apart from that, I guess we could say that cooking itself is like doing chemistry in your kitchen. I mean, if boiling an egg can be reversed, there's definitely some denaturation and renaturation, I guess, in action. At the same time, we can use chemistry to identify compounds and make some things toxic and remove or lessen them to make something edible. Or at least tell people acrylamide is carcinogenic so people won't eat too much burnt stuff. But anyways, apart from that, chemistry is used a lot in farming. Think of fertilizers, pesticides, etc. One very, very famous reaction that comes to mind is the Haber process. The nitrogen plus 3 hydrogen becomes 2 ammonia thing, which is useful for fertilizers. At the same time, we also end up having to worry about the environmental consequences of the fertilizer, which could leach into the water and promote algae growth. Because once again, chemistry again happens, and that's what allows the algae to grow and to photosynthesize and to be a thing. And now we can even grow like artificial meat and things like that using nutrients meant for cell growth. By putting in the right chemicals and the right molecules, we can get something to happen. Speaking of avoiding carcinogens and growing nutrient rich food and everything, chemistry also helps us in the medical field. chemistry allows us to mass produce pharma stuff by looking at the reaction pathways of the drugs, how they're metabolized and things like that. Actually, no, not how they're metabolized, but like how you can create them from similar molecules and seeing what reactions you can do on one particular molecule to get another. So actually, if you see some of the drugs like Panadol and some other various drugs, they do have certain similarities to common starting products that you can use to get to these medicines. And sometimes you could use something like petroleum or something like that to get from something that's just some remain like the leftovers from the petroleum into something that's actually useful, not necessarily medicine but something useful. And yeah, so using receptor chemistry, we can also find new medicines computationally. So this works by looking at the shape of the receptor, because in order for a medicine to do its thing, it needs to interact with a particular receptor. And in order for it to interact with the receptor, they need to have complementary shapes. So, using computational skills and also understanding the chemistry of like how it interacts, how the receptor and the medicine is going to interact, we can then design new medicines without having to spend so much time and effort trying to find it. And at the same time, we can, make existing things like insulin and hormones by growing in, like, we can mass produce these hormones in bacteria growing in rats. And that is possible because we understand how the biochemistry of the bacteria can be modified to make them produce things like insulin and hormones. For example, like the way it's done is by taking uh, a gene, a particular DNA that is responsible for coding for the protein that makes insulin. Then you put it into a bacteria, and then the bacteria can read the DNA and do the thing. Yeah, so I've told about it before, so I'm not gonna go into detail. So apart from all of this, we use chemistry to see how foods and other compounds break down or metabolize in the body, and similarly target them with the counter medicines. So for example, fixing adult, like, okay, this is just a fun example that I think your chemistry teacher would have definitely told you at some point. If someone drinks alcohol that is tainted with methanol, the cure for it is to literally just infuse pure ethanol, like make them extra drunk. Yeah, because it will prevent the methanol from being metabolized as much. Yeah, okay, then anyway, that's just a fun fact. Okay, so apart from using how things break down and metabolize and how they excrete as well to to guide medicine and to make new drugs or medicines or whatever it is that you want to do, we can also use chemistry to see if things like grafts and prosthetics and implants will actually work well in the body. So what that means is, let's say you're gonna put something into the body. I think the most common kind of thing that you would imagine being put in a body is something like a stent, and that would actually be in contact with the literal cells in your body. So you don't want it to have a serious reaction to it and create a even worse situation than it was before you put it in. And that's why we need to know the chemistry of these things and to understand what interactions the material will have with the body. And you can also look into whether they will biodegrade over time, which would make things maybe easier, or whether you actually don't want it to biodegrade over time and things like that. So chemistry helps with that. Anyway, speaking of those grafts, many of them are actually made of biodegradable polymers. And polymers are one of the things that makes plastics. Yes, so I think one of the most impactful stuff we have are plastics, and we can make so many polymers for so many purposes, and at the same time, because of that, struggle with recycling them, just because there's just way too many different kinds, and also because they are made in a way that it's a bit hard to break them down sometimes. Right. So, and in general, materials of all sorts came about through refinement with chemical methods or combination with chemical methods. Of course, I wouldn't say bronze is an example because it's more of a solution rather than a reacted compound. It's just a mixture of it's like an alloy. But okay, that's also an example, I guess. But you can talk about metals apart from alloying them, you could probably add certain layers onto metals to make them more resistant, because we know metals like to oxidize. Some of them will create their own natural oxidative layer that protects them. Some of them require a sacrificial metal, or they need another non-metal to cover them. So that's why we need chemistry to know what's going on with our rusty iron nail, in a sense. And yeah, so apart from that, you also look at the catalyst of progress and of climate devastation, fuel, and power. Either by burning stuff, aka doing more rigorous oxidation, or if you want it to be cleaner, using silicon to get some solar power, or some nuclear fission to get nuclear power. Speaking of both of those things, the latter, basically nuclear fission, definitely played a huge part in the years before and during the Cold War. I think I already told about this two episodes ago, so you don't really need to share this again. Along with the explosions used to fight wars and metals used to make weapons. So chemistry also plays a part in how wars are fought, not just in terms of nuclear stuff, but even in normal weapons. Like how do you get a metal thing to accelerate at a really fast speed by exploding something? And gunpowder itself, it's technically a chemical thing. Like understanding how the chemistry of a fire works and optimizing it is what allowed people to make these explosive things. And yeah, apart from that, if we look at the silicon part of it, well, the silicon in the solar panels features heavily in our phones and computers and cars and whatever else is part of the Internet of Things, or has a chip in it. And the buildings that we put solar panels on, I mean, yes, I'm just trying to flow to the next point, sorry. But yeah, so solar panels have silicon, you put them on top of buildings, but the buildings themselves are made of concrete, which also sets because of chemistry. You know, yeah, I think I've told about this once in a previous episode, how concrete works. But yeah, if you want to summarize all of this, well, I could say that chemistry allows us to make materials for all forms and purposes, to look at the deeper seas and venture into the highest of skies. By the way, we have some probes somehow surviving, going through space, going to Mars, and even more so going somewhere near Venus, which is a big win, because Venus is really, really hard to get anything on, given its very toxic environment and very attacking environment. And yeah, we can also look at inventions at many different scales: nano, like nanoparticles, and mega, like all those big things that you send into space or you use to detect other things, or even things like uh, the one in, like, the LIGO system itself is trying to detect something that's really small, but it spans over a large distance, as well as CERN. It has a, what's the thing called again? I forgot the name of the thing. That big, the accelerator, the thing that accelerates molecules so fast that they end up colliding to each other, that kind of stuff. And those things are huge. So you get the point. And the reason why I say that is because those things also require chemistry in order to understand how to get a magnet to be very magnetic, or to create the materials for that specific purpose. Yeah, that's the point. Anyways, apart from inventions and things like that, we can look at research. And as I mentioned just now, CERN and LIGO, they are both used in research. But apart from that, we can look at actual chemistry, which has just actual chemistry, like creating new materials, seeing how we can optimize existing materials, or how we can make things greener, green chemistry, all sorts of things involved in chemistry. And apart from chemistry, you can look at biochemistry, which is stuff like, looking at receptor or receptor tags, doing things like ELISA, which involves using an antibody or a, ligand that can attach to the thing that you want to find out. And then to that thing, you'll be attaching a fluorescent thing so that you can actually see where that particular thing that you want to find is. Yeah. And fluorescence itself is basically understood via chemistry or physics, I guess, and understanding how the electrons get excited and de-excited which gives you the colors that you want. And this helps with imaging in a sense, yeah. So yeah, that's research. Actually, I mean, I could go into details, but for that, I didn't really write it down, so I don't want to say something wrongly and then not like myself for that. Yeah. But yeah, research has a lot of things that involve chemistry, from actual chemistry to stuff like biochemistry to material science, because maybe you would want to make a graphene, you have to figure out how to do it. Or if you're making hydrogel, there's certain things I need to consider when you're making a hydrogel, like how you're supposed to fill it up with CO2 instead of water, because CO2 is what they want to do, and then bring it to the critical states, right? It will evaporate out of the hydrogel and then leave it like a gel with holes in it. You know, yeah. That kind of stuff is quite interesting actually. Anyway, so apart from research, another thing that we see chemistry in is art. Basically, all of the colors that you see everywhere. Of course, many of them used to come from natural sources, but natural sources aren't always the best or aren't always abundant. And sometimes you don't, even though you get some pretty nice colors from things like beetroot and purple cabbage, it's not all of the colors that you can get, like, and some of the other colors that you can get from minerals and rocks also possible, but there are some that are either too toxic to use for a long term or just really hard to get, and that's why they aren't in they aren't really being manufactured as much anymore, except for a few people who are dedicated to recreating traditional colors. We still have we are now moved on to synthetic colors, which can also once again maybe be produced from some random petroleum derivative. I don't know. Yeah. And of course, a lot of them are inorganic materials as well. So, like for example, Prussian blue is just an iron salt. Inmin blue is another very new blue, which is supposed to be like the bluest blue or something, but it is a newly invented blue, and it's also made of I believe it's yttrium, indium, and manganese. Yeah, I believe that's what it is. So that's another blue there. And actually, blue is quite hard to make, so it's a bit hard to get a variety of blue colors. But anyway, all of the other colors that we see and the shades of colors, and even stuff like white, titanium white, which is everywhere, even in your toothpaste probably, if you buy whitening toothpaste, is in there. That is also a chemical thing, like you make it's a titanium salt. So there we go. There's all sorts of colors which occurs due to chemistry. I think the only place where you see something different is maybe structural colors. So I'm just gonna give you a fun fact. For example, some butterflies look very colorful, but in reality, it's not because the butterfly is actually in that color, but rather because they have small microstructures on the wings, which reflect light in such a way, or they absorb and emit light in such a way that it gives a specific color look. I mean, not emit, reflect. Yeah, you get the point. So that's the only place where you don't really see a direct chemical involvement in colors. Right. So yeah, that's pretty much most of the points. Now let us look at the light-hearted and the more fun reason why chemistry is so impactful in history. I believe that chemistry was probably one of the sciences that inspired many kids to pursue either chemistry itself or other sciences once they became older and more appreciative of science, through either colors and exciting reactions. If you've watched the Royal Institution, I think the favorite stuff would probably be the ones that involve chemical reactions. They're always so fun to watch. But the rest of the talks, I save them in my watch later list and then forget to watch them. Oops. Okay, anyways, the point is chemistry is very visual. Like, there's a lot of visual stuff they can see. We can actually show it live in person, and that gets people inspired to learn science, to be interested in science, and eventually have a job or do stuff in science that helps to progress innovations and progress research as well. So that's the light-hearted point that you can give. And of course, also the fact that I named my channel Alkaline Hydroxide. Eh. Okay, I guess that's not a very impactful history thing, but okay. Oh. Anyways, so that's all the points I have today. I was actually low-key worried I would end up talking forever, but I didn't talk forever. I talked lesser than usual. That is surprising. Okay. Maybe because I didn't want to talk too much, so I kind of regulated myself to end up not talking a lot. I think it's a good thing. I don't want, if I talk too much, then it feels a bit too droning on after some time. Anyways, I hope you like this video and I hope you like chemistry as much as I do. If you did like the video and you find it useful, please press the like button and subscribe. And with that, I would like to say thank you and bye.